同学可不可以介绍一下自己？
我叫关佳琪，关就是关羽的关嘛，然后嘉是嘉奖嘉峪关的那个嘉，琪是麒麟的麒。
我高中毕业之后就入党，中国共产党一直在走的是一个从来没有经历过的一条路，把马克思主义生搬硬套到中国的时候是实现不了的。我们要把它真正去本土化，我们去把它吸收掉。
讲到中国传统文化的话，我们最耳熟能详的就是儒家的学派，就是讲究修身齐家治国平天下，仁义礼智信。
I drove around China, 200,000 kilometers. But once I saw the amazing changes in China, what's the historical or philosophical background of this? So that's when I started.
Marxism is the fundamental guiding ideology of both the Communist Party of China and New China, while fine traditional culture has been a unique spiritual marker of the Chinese nation for more than 5,000 years. Ever since the CPC chose Marxism as its ideology, it has strived to adapt the basic principles of Marxism to China's reality. In the centenary year of the founding of the party, the top leader of the CPC emphasized for the first time the integration of the basic principles of Marxism with China's fine traditional culture. Yet, what exactly is this integration, and why is it so important? If you're interested in China, then understanding the second integration may go a long way to helping you understand China and its governance on a deeper level. American professor William Brown of Xiamen University has lived in China for more than 30 years and written extensively about life in his adopted homeland. So in this interview, he shares his personal experience of traditional Chinese wisdom and modern governance. Professor Brown, when you first heard of the concept 第二个结合, which translates to the second integration, what were your initial thoughts?
Well, my initial thought was, what on earth was the first integration? The first integration was adapting China to Marxism. So the second integration is recognizing that China does have a very rich culture, rich history, rich tradition in government. The longer I'm in China and the more I understand China, the more I realize there's a continuity.
China has a continuous history and culture that spans from ancient times to the present day. Prior to the Industrial Revolution, the Chinese nation had long been a world leader in many fields. In your view, what factors contributed to the timing of this new guiding philosophy?
China adopted Marxism and the historical factors that forced China to make a radical change, because the world was basically destroying China for 100 years because it was do or die. Now China is prosperous and has changed the living standards of more people than any other nation in history. It comes at 100 years, and it shows that China has confidence and pride in what it's done the past 100 years, and they're going to build upon this for the next 100 years at least.
Cultural weakness can be regarded as the true source of China's backwardness in the early 20th century. The process of national rejuvenation, in essence, is a process of modernization, including everything from the political, economic, and cultural arenas. What makes it so important to China?
The modern success is really rooted in the ancient China. If we don't have the second integration, if China doesn't build upon its strengths, unique strengths, I don't think it can go forward.
For those who are not familiar with China's history and development, how would you explain this new theory to them?
Chinese has been in spirit Marxist for 2,000 years. The whole point of the Marxism was to get rid of the terrible abuses and imbalances, poverty and social classes. Marxism is concerned about equality. Confucius emphasized a harmonious society. Confucian-based China was really pre-Marxist Marxism. China embraced Marxism so readily because China had a similar philosophy for over 2,000 years. A lot of foreigners think Confucianism is a religion. It's not. Confucius wasn't concerned about the next life. It's a philosophy, social philosophy of how people live together.
At the core of Marxism is the ultimate establishment of a communist society and the realization of the free development of every human being. This begins with the approach of dialectical materialism and historical materialism and is achieved through the scientific transformation of the world. Traditional Chinese culture emphasizes ethics and morality and practicality and stability. Indeed, the concept of a people-centered society is one of the basic features of traditional Chinese culture.
The Chinese government is built in Chinese culture, but Chinese culture is built on Confucian education. Just like today, the leaders today, they have to go to university, then they get in a low position and they prove themselves, and if they do well, they move up. They didn't get the position by votes, which you can buy if you have billions of dollars, buy TV ads. The Chinese obtained their positions through hard work and merit. I like to call Chinese government the fifth great invention. 1731, Eustace Budgell, an English politician, he said the world knows China made these four great inventions, but he said all nations admit that what China is best at is the art of government. 300 years ago, all these other countries are struggling with each other, but China, this giant country with an ancient history, giant population, has been pretty much stable. Voltaire, he said that it's pretty clear that China has the best government on earth, form of government on earth. He said that. And so now China is embracing again its history, its heritage, its culture. It's confident enough to adapt Marxism to fit what the real China is. So that's pretty cool.
Professor Brown attributes China's fast development in just a few decades to the wisdom of its leaders, as well as the diligence and ingenuity of its people.
A good example is Xi Jinping being in Liangjiahe when he's 15 years old and 7 years there. He was hungry. They're always hungry. So he saw these things personally and helped resolve these things personally. But it's not just Xi Jinping. To me, throughout Chinese history, this is how it's worked. And these people go from nothing to become a leader. They're solving basic problems, how to help people live better. They're put into positions of responsibility. If they don't use their positions to help people, they don't move up. You don't read about them. But from the Western viewpoint, they always talk about it's the communists on top, the heavy hand of the communist rulers controlling everything, and the country could have never grown like this if that was. But if you have great people and no leadership, no direction, but if China had good leaders, but the people couldn't follow through on the plans, the leaders are useless. So China has both. My Wuxiang, my hero, is Huang Daopo. In Shanghai 700 years ago, she invented these machines for textiles. In Europe 300 years ago, one of the historians said that Huang Daopo's textile machines were more advanced than those of England in the Industrial Revolution. So you look at history, you see people from the bottom who are very creative. But modern China, my goodness, even better. For example, a lady I've known for 30 years. She came to Xiamen in 1981. She sold fish, she sold pork, she started a rural credit union. Today, this lady with 4 years education has 4 international schools, and she has a biotechnology company. She's also spent millions of dollars helping fight poverty around the country and helping build infrastructure. And every retired person in her hometown, she supports financially. These are the people that built China.
What are the aspects of the traditional culture that are timeless?
The Chinese love of family. The Chinese, through the centuries, have been very patriotic. They love their country. Everywhere I go in China, people are grateful that they live in a country that's improved, that's prospering. I've always encouraged my friends to come to China. And they come here, some of them nervous, coming to this communist country, and they said, wow, they had no idea China was like this. And people actually smile. One other thing, peace. I admire that Chinese throughout history have emphasized peace. And even Art of War is a perfect, best manual in history for fighting wars. But Sun Tzu said, the best thing is don't fight. Avoid war, if at all possible. And then Lao Tzu, and he said, the use of force is wrong. So war is absolutely the last resort for Chinese.
How does this new theory kind of help in explaining to the outside world that China is never a threat?
An American missionary and shaman in 1907 wrote a book, and he said, the West talks about China conquering the West. He said that will never happen. By nature and instinct and by history, Chinese are peace-loving people. They like trade and commerce. I think if foreigners understood, Chinese historically have never gone to far countries and engaged in colonialism. China has never sold narcotics like opium at gunpoint. China has never sold tens of millions of slaves. China has never done anything like that. China historically is engaged in peaceful trade with other nations. And there's no record in history of where Chinese have ever used force. The world needs to understand, Chinese are not a danger to the world. But as far as the second integration, I think that what will convince people is China's continued actions. The most important message for China to the world is what it does. And it has been consistent for a long time. Ever since Western countries learned the Chinese secret of gunpowder, it's been hard power, win-lose. And we see this developing countries more and more are getting pretty disgusted with the way they've been treated with some of the richer countries, when they're slowly coming to view China differently because they're seeing China is consistent.
Traditional Chinese culture has long been a rich source of wisdom when it comes to governance. This incorporates ideas like a people-centered society, virtuous rule, clean governance, meritocratic selection, keeping pace with the times, and living together in harmony. Reflecting on the history of the CPC and the new China, what aspects have remained relatively constant despite all those notable changes?
The aspect that remains pretty constant is the same aspect that remained constant for 2,000 years, and that is that the primary focus is people's livelihood. And they do whatever it takes for that. For example, in '94, when I first drove around China, I went to Ningxia, which a UNESCO official said there's no hope, it was so poor. The government was already there building roads. But when I drove around China again in 2019, the same route, I saw amazing changes in every place. The focus is raising people's living standard, helping them to have moderate prosperity, not riches. In the West, they have this feast and famine, up and down, but here's just moderate prosperity, which is more reasonable. And that's based in ancient Chinese philosophy and Taoism. Everywhere I went, Ningxia, Mongolia, Tibet, people were saying, roads first, then riches. So pragmatic, so practical. And this is the mindset of the ancient Chinese who invented everything under the sun to meet practical needs. The Belt and Road is simply exporting roads first, then riches. It's the same idea. He's built that on China's experience. Xi Jinping emphasized ending absolute poverty. And once he reached that goal, they said that's just the beginning. The next step is the rural revitalization, improving the lifestyle of people in the rural areas. This also is in keeping with ancient Chinese values. Again, 2,000 years ago, 60 million people, the focus is the Xiaokang. Not to get rich and have rich and poor, but just to have at least moderately prosperous people. So this shows China's wisdom really in balance, in being sustainable. I have an interesting book from 100 years ago where agricultural experts came to China and they said they wanted to see how Chinese farmers farm the same pieces of land for 4,000 years. Tiny plots of land, and for 4,000 years it continued to be fertile and fruitful. So in the West, with the modern farming, get everything fast, within 3 or 4 years they destroy the land. But in China, 4,000 years, the same piece of land. Very comprehensive, very scientific. The West is very proud of the Industrial Revolution. That was possible because of the Agricultural Revolution. The Agricultural Revolution was possible because of ancient Chinese farming. The Dutch here in Fujian 500 years ago, they learned about the Chinese plow and about the seed drills 2,000 years ago. These Chinese agricultural practices and inventions 500 years ago made possible the agricultural revolution, and that freed up the population to move to the cities, which made the industrial revolution possible. Today, the government is keeping the focus on agriculture and on feeding the people. So I think this rural revitalization is just the apex. is culminating what China's been trying to do for 2,000 years. As far as the environment is concerned, that's also been part of China's heritage. That's why China agriculture or China's society has been so sustainable. The World Bank recognized that China had done more than any country on earth to feed the hungry. Robert McNamara, head of the World Bank, said, "It's a miracle that's gone unnoticed by the West." It wasn't unnoticed, it's ignored. So in so many ways, China has surpassed the West. In so many areas over this 2,000 years, China has been ahead of the rest of the world. So China was modern when the rest of the world was not. And then today, you see the same thing. Even farmers or Tibetan nomads in the remotest areas doing e-commerce, Mongolian farmers tracking down their sheep with their phone and the satellite. But where in the rest of the world do they have things like this? We take it for granted here, but then when I go outside of China, I feel like I've gone back in time 20 years.
Professor Brown has read almost all of President Xi's publications and observes that since his youth, Xi has placed great importance on the preservation and modernization of traditional Chinese culture.
Xi Jinping, this is not new for him. When he went to Zhengding, from the very beginning, before he even went to Zhengding, he researched their history and their culture and collected materials. One of the big things that he recommended they do is write the book, Zhengding Gujin, Zhengding Old and New, because he went around and he said, we need to preserve our history and culture and build on it. And he wanted him to write this new book, he said, because if you forget your history, you don't understand today, and if you don't understand today, how can you build for the future? So even back then, when he's in his late 20s and early 30s, he's trying to integrate respect and understanding of Chinese history and culture into modern life. And then when he came to Fujian, same thing. He researched the history, the heritage, the culture. When he went to Ningdao, he found the Shub minority, or the poorest of the poor. And he emphasized preserving their culture, especially the music. Now, Zhengding, every corner of the place is modern and developed, and the people are happy and proud of their heritage. So it's the same with China.